I am here tonight to present to you a balanced budget for fiscal year 2016. This year's budget has been a challenge because the cost of operating city government is increasing at a rate of over $10 million per year. In fact, over the past 3 years, the general fund budget has increased $33 million for an average annual increase of $11 million per year. Against this year's $10 million budget increase, that's the general fund budget, our net state local aid only increased about $4.5 million, the net Chapter 70 plus net unrestricted local aid. Less than half of what the cost of doing business has gone up. And now we couple that structural deficit with one of the worst winters in history, 9 feet of snow, that now leaves us shoveling out from under a $2.5 million snow removal deficit that now has to be paid. Oh, it keeps doing that. We spent a total this year in snow removal of $4.8 million, $2.5 million more than the $2.3 million that was in the FY2015 budget. And that was a reasonable amount to be budgeted at the time. No one could have ever anticipated for, financed for, or paid for that level of snow removal. But you know, it actually could have been worse, because as we look around, Worcester spent $6.6 million and Quincy spent $13 million. So our $4.8 million sounds a little easier to live with when we look at the situation that some other cities similar to Brockton find themselves in. Even with a number of budget cuts already in place, putting these two factors together, our initial budget showed an overall deficit of $6.3 million. $6.3 million deficit coming into the budget. So we went to work to determine what $6.3 million in budget cuts would look like. And it wasn't pretty. The closing of at least one school with teacher layoffs, probably close to 300. The closing of at least one fire station with firefighters laid off. Reducing the number of police officers with unfilled vacancies. And in fact, layoffs across every city department, and we would even be looking at turning off some of the city streetlights. After looking at those cuts, I came to the conclusion that we just could not cut that deeply. And as elected officials, we have an obligation to fulfill the promises of city government, to preserve public safety, to provide a quality public school education for our children, and to sustain essential city services. So I determined that I would have to utilize the allowable 2.5% increase in the tax levy this year to close the budget gap. Now, let's be clear. I am no less committed to property tax relief than I was a year ago when I did submit a balanced budget to you that did not require us to use any of the 2.5% levy increase. But this year, I cannot jeopardize public safety, we cannot decimate the Brockton Public Schools, and we do have to pay off that $2.5 million snow removal deficit. The 2.5% tax levy will generate about $3 million. So to get to a balanced budget, we've still had to make over $3 million in budget cuts over and above the additional $3 million of revenue. However, despite having made over $3 million in budget cuts, the FY16 budget that you have before you this evening maintains level staffing of both the fire and police departments while providing a $5 million increase in funding to the schools. In fact, by maintaining level police department staffing, we have qualified for a federal COPS grant that will pay us the cost of 2 additional police officers to add to our force. As we look to the future, it's clear that we will not be able to continue to provide essential services to our residents without developing additional sources of revenue. We need to expand our tax base, generating new revenues from new taxpayers. Continuing our work and investment in economic development is critical as we help existing businesses to expand, bring new business to the city, and attract families to the city of Brockton to buy their home. We've already created new additional streams of revenue, such as our sale of tax title properties that generated over $1 million this year. That money cannot be spent in this year's budget, but will be available to help balance next year's budget. And that will be $1 million next year that we will not have to ask the taxpayers for. We must also ask the large nonprofit corporations in the city, many of whom drain our public safety resources, to step up and help us. And councilors, it's time to put the long, costly legal battle over the electric plant behind us and begin collecting the guaranteed $4 million per year that we so desperately need. Over the next several evenings, we'll work closely with you as you review the FY2016 budget, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this evening, and I will now make myself available to answer any questions you may have regarding the mayor's office budget.